So guys, welcome back to another video, and this is another basketball reaction, and the video is who has been the clutchest player in the NBA for the last 10 years. I love these kinds of videos, man. This is sort of what my channel was initially based on, like these sort of random, just informational videos that sort of teach me about certain attributes of the player. And I would consider like being clutch as a kind of an attribute, like as a mental sort of, to be like a clutch player, you have to be mentally strong to like sort of perform in the highest pressure situations. So I would call it an attribute. Maybe that's not the case, but just these sort of videos that sort of focus on unique things that you wouldn't really find out if it wasn't for YouTube, pretty much. Because I mean, ESPN would not be doing things like this, and like just these sort of videos. Basically, I'm rambling at this point, but yeah, Legend of Winning. I'm subscribed to the channel. It must have been a long time since I've watched one of his videos, but yeah, this video's been suggested. I'm interested to see who like could be in here. Like LeBron, like I'm thinking of LeBron, but I don't know if he'd be considered a clutch player or if he's a player who just performs in the highest sort of occasions. Because I know he's known as a playoff, like he just turns up at the playoffs. But would that be clutch? I mean, I'm guessing he'll explain it in this video, but would that be considered clutch, or is that just a player who performs in the highest sort of occasions? I don't know, but let's check this out and see what this video's got for us.
What's up, YouTube? It's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another video. Man, it feels like a long time since I said that intro, and I deeply apologize for the lack of videos within the last months. However, in today's video, we pick it right back up with one of the more interesting topics in the NBA community,
Dame as well.
And that is clutch. See, in my opinion, some of the more intriguing conversations that we have in the community are centered around the ideology of being clutch. And the reason for this is because when it comes down to determining how clutch a player is, it's possibly the only intangible that we have in all of sports that has an immediate statistical result. Yet for whatever reason, people still overlook the facts and still feel comfortable and confident in pushing narratives based off of their biases.
LeBron James, as great as he is, as gifted as he is, was not born with a clutch gene.
However,
what? I've seen people getting on Skip. I saw on Twitter, I think it was yesterday, it was between Dame and him, and he said something about Dame, and Dame just snapped back and pretty much done him. Is he known for his controversial opinions? Does he just say things to sort of get people riled up and to just sort of get clicks, I guess you could say? Or does he have respectable opinions as well? Because I see a lot of the stuff he says, and he just seems to have sort of like agendas against certain players.
Today, I would like to shed some light in that conversation and thoroughly determine who has been the clutchest player in the NBA over the past decade. Now, to be a bit transparent, it took me a while to research this video because on both NBA.com and on Basketball Reference, there isn't an individual tab for each player for me to look at their averages over a set amount of years when it comes to clutch performances. But because of this, I had to set my own parameters when it came down to researching for this video. One of those parameters had to do with the type of player that I was going to include in my research, and I decided to only look at volume scores. Now, don't get me wrong, role players can definitely make clutch plays, but as we all know, the type of shots that a player like Iguodala is going to receive down the stretch of a very important game is going to be vastly different from the type of shots that Curry is going to receive down the stretch of that exact same game, which then led me down a vigorous rabbit hole when it came down to filtering out players, and it left me with 13 names. If there's any other players that aren't on this list, more than likely they didn't make it because their volume or sample size wasn't large enough. For example, Kemba Walker, who's only had 2 playoff appearances, and also certain big men such as LaMarcus Aldridge and Anthony Davis. Now, the second parameter that I set, and it's going to be a bit controversial, but I decided to only look at scoring stats. Now, the reason why I did this is because, A, when it comes to being clutch and performing under pressure, that's more or less just synonymous to how well you can score in those situations. B, I don't want no one in my comment section claiming that X player gets bailed out in clutch situations since he's passing it to open shooters.
You know how the comments are.
More importantly, I believe it was just going to be more interesting to see the scoring numbers rather than looking at rebounds and assists. And third and finally, how exactly did I find being clutch? The first way to find it is during the regular season, and I just decided to use the default on NBA.com.
So I feel like that would be, I done a reaction to the Portland game yesterday, and like Dame just went off as he does, like Dame time, I think it's known as. Is this sort of his sort of definition of clutch for Dame? Like he just sort of goes off in the last few minutes of games? Because I could see that. That's why I thought of Dame initially.
Which is the last 5 minutes in a game with a point differential of 5 or less. The second way that I decided to define clutch is through postseason play. And instead of looking at just the last 5 minutes of a game, I decided just to look at the entire fourth quarter in overtime. And third and finally, even though I find it very simple-minded and annoying to heavily rely on the last 24 seconds argument, it would be very interesting to see who would you want to have taking the last shot in the game. So what I decided to do is, during the regular season and postseason, who would you have taking either the game-tying or go-ahead bucket within the last 35 seconds of action? So first, let's talk about the regular season performances. Just as a quick reminder, we are looking at the last 5 minutes in a game where the point differential is 5 or less. And under those circumstances, Kyrie Irving actually leads all 13 players in points scored while averaging 3.9 points.
That's kind of
Following
mad.
him are Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Russell Westbrook. And towards the bottom, you have Klay Thompson, who is rather distant from everyone else, averaging less than 2 points. And then ahead of Klay Thompson, you have Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, and DeMar DeRozan, who are all roughly giving you around 2.4 to 2.6 points. Now, moving on to field goal percentage, we have LeBron James leading the pack, shooting 46.5% from the field, which is a noticeable margin to the runner-up, which is Kyrie Irving, and Chris Paul tied, shooting 43.6% from the field. And then towards the bottom, surprisingly, Paul George actually shoots the worst out of everyone, shooting 39% from the field, which is pretty concerning. Not too far removed from him, you have Damian Lillard, Klay Thompson, and Russell Westbrook. Moving on to three-point percentage, at the top of the list, it shouldn't be a surprise. You have Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry. And then when it comes to the worst three-point shooters,
that's kind of, see, maybe because I know Klay, like Thompson, is insane at his threes, but I mean, I guess from my previous videos, I just sort of had the narrow mindset that Kyrie would just be the best. But maybe that's because he's the sort of, wasn't it like he's the guy who sort of made threes popular or something along those lines? Like, he's changed the sport initially. I think that's maybe why I thought him. But looking at that, DeRozan, Jesus Christ.
This really shouldn't be a surprise at all. By a pretty noticeable margin, you not only have DeMar DeRozan, but you also have Russell Westbrook. So, makes a lot of sense. And finally, we have free throw percentage. And to nobody's surprise, Steph Curry leads the pack as he's the only player who shoots above 90% in these late game situations. And then towards the bottom of the list, again, not that much of a surprise. However, it is very concerning and noticeable when you have such a massive margin between the last person and the second to last, who is LeBron James, shooting 75% from the free throw line. And then second to that is DeMar DeRozan at 80%. Now, of course, just reading off numbers may not necessarily put things in the best picture for many of you all. So what I decided to do when it came down to effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage, I decided to graph all of these players amongst one another. And on these graphs, you can clearly see the three players who really separate themselves from everyone else are Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving, and LeBron James. And I would make the argument that since LeBron is such a poor free throw shooter, I would go ahead and confidently state when it comes to regular season performances, either Steph Curry or Kyrie Irving are your best options. And for my own personal preference, I would lean towards Kyrie, largely because his volume and the field goal percentage is very respectable. However, Steph Curry isn't that far removed.
I didn't know, like, I didn't think of like Kyrie being like a clutch player, like in those sort of circumstances. I knew he was insane at his sort of his dribbling, etc., and like his handles, should I say. He's insane in that, and he's got some insane like moments of like scoring. But I didn't like initially think he would be up there. So that's sort of like, and I rate him. He's one of my favorite players. Trust me when I say that. He's one of my favorite players. On the eye, he's crazy. But this has just sort of boosted my sort of, I guess you could say, what's the word I could say? Like, just sort of my thoughts on him as a player. Like, he's better than I even initially thought.
But when it comes to who are the worst performers, it is clearly both DeMar DeRozan and Russell Westbrook.
Oh,
both
mad.
of them are bottom two in
Westbrook down there.
Effective field goal percentage, and true shooting percentage. And they are also in the bottom when it comes to free throw percentage. And if I had to choose between one or the other, I would say that Westbrook is actually the worst performer, largely because of his volume, which is just completely unjustifiable when you look at his efficiency. But when it comes to the amount of shots that he attempts, he actually leads all 13 players, which again is just ridiculous.
See, that's
now, moving on to playoffs,
well.
and just as a quick reminder, we're looking at the entire fourth quarter in overtime. And leading in points, we have LeBron James at 7.5. Following him, you have Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, and Russell Westbrook. And then at the bottom of the list, we have Klay Thompson at 4.2. Then after that, we have Kawhi Leonard, DeMar DeRozan, and Kyrie Irving. Next up, we have field goal percentage. And in this category, I am highly surprised in various different ways. Looking at the bottom, we have Kyrie Irving, Paul George, and Damian Lillard all shooting 40% or worse. Now, for me, that's really surprising when it comes to Kyrie Irving, especially when you put into context that majority of his postseason runs have featured him alongside LeBron James. So for him to shoot that poorly from the field just doesn't make any sense at all. But the player that is worse is Russell Westbrook, shooting below 37% from the field. And you know what makes it even worse? That he actually leads all of these players in volume, averaging out 5.9 shot attempts in the fourth quarter.
That's crazy. He goes for the most shots and his percentage is like lower. But maybe that's to do with maybe the more shots you take, the more chance you have of missing. The law of averages. That's probably not the case, to be honest. But that's an interesting stat. That is.
When it comes to the top of the list, we have Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and James Harden, as all of them are shooting 45% or better from the field. And then leading the pack is Chris Paul, shooting 50% from the field in fourth quarter and overtimes, which to me was extremely impressive, and I was definitely surprised because I was not expecting a point guard to lead that statistical category. Moving on to three-point percentage, not too much of a surprise except for the fact that Kawhi Leonard leads the pack, shooting above 40% from behind the arc, but not too far removed from him. You have Steph Curry, then Jimmy Butler, Chris Paul, and Klay Thompson.
Wait, just to make sure, can you guys see these stats? Oh, you can't see half of them. Are you serious? Oh, that's so annoying. I apologise for that. I want to change it, but I don't know where to move it. I could put it top right, but I feel like... Fuck it, let's try... Wait, let's just click camera. I should have done this from the start, for God's sake. Let's move that there. This is going to be weird. I apologise for this. This is kind of scuffed right now. If there's something in the top right, I apologise. I should have done this from the start, I'm not going to lie.
And then at the bottom, again, no real surprise here. You have DeMar DeRozan. Following him, you have Russell Westbrook. But what is a surprise is James Harden, who's shooting 30% from behind the arc, which is rather low for somebody who receives the title of being a three-point shooter.
That's mental.
When it comes to free throw percentage, we have Steph Curry shooting above 90%. Following him, you have Chris Paul, who is putting up very impressive postseason numbers so far. Then Damian Lillard, DeMar DeRozan, and Kyrie Irving. And then at the bottom, again, no surprise, you have LeBron James shooting 76% from the charity stripe. And then right above LeBron, disappointingly enough, is Paul George, as he's the only other player on this list who shoots below 80% from the free throw line in fourth quarter and overtimes during playoff games. And finally, when we look at the effective field goal percentage and true shooting graphs, they are very telling. So the first thing I want to point out is LeBron, who is completely debunking the myth that he's afraid to take any important shots down the stretch of close games. However, the one thing that does stand out to me is his efficiency, as he only shoots 45% from the field, low 30s from behind the arc, and of course, being a great free throw shooter of these group of players, his efficiency just isn't that impressive at all, which is highly disappointing. And quite honest, if it wasn't for how bad Russell Westbrook performed, the average for effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage would have been a bit higher, which thus meant that LeBron would have been below average in both of those categories. And to be completely honest with you all, I just was not expecting that at all. The second thing I noticed is James Harden, who is okay in these situations. He's not great, but probably isn't as bad as a lot of people depict him out to be, which definitely doesn't negate some of the poor performances and unforgivable moments that he has displayed throughout his postseason career. However, when you look at the numbers in totality, the numbers really aren't that bad. The player who was a massive surprise was Kawhi Leonard, who was at the top of both effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage. However, his volume just isn't there. He's really only had 2 postseason runs where he has been the first option when it comes to scoring, so I don't feel confident and comfortable claiming that he has been the clutchest performer during the playoffs. But the player I do feel comfortable saying that with is Chris Paul, who has not only been roughly average when it comes to points scored, but also leads his pack in field goal percentage, has a very respectable three-point percentage, and is second when it comes to free throw percentage. And then when it comes to the bottom, however, and Westbrook, as you all can clearly see, my goodness, Russell Westbrook, what is going on? Westbrook has an effective field goal percentage that is below 40%. Be very mindful that he has the highest volume out of everyone when it comes to shot attempts. That is completely unacceptable. I don't care how you slice it. it just does not justify the amount of shots that Westbrook receives when you look at his efficiency in all categories. Following after that, we have both DeMar DeRozan, which isn't that much of a surprise, but Kyrie Irving, which is a bit of a surprise, and it is very disappointing when you put into context that, again, he has played alongside LeBron James. And finally, let's look at the who would you want taking the last shot argument.
Okay.
Again, just as a quick reminder, these are game tying or go ahead.
Who I would want. Let's just have my guess. Who would I want? Because LeBron, from what I've seen and from what some people have said, he isn't like, his shooting isn't his best attribute, should I say. And although, like, it's hard. It's hard, man. Maybe Curry, but I don't even know if he would be up there like that. Depends what shot. I mean, we're going to see.
In the last 35 seconds in both the regular season and playoffs. And under these circumstances, there's no need for me to go into any deep details about points and free throw percentages. The thing that's way more important is accuracy, so we're only going to look at field goal percentage and also dabble in three-point percentage as well. But when it comes to the regular season, by a noticeable margin, we have Klay Thompson at the top, shooting 44% from the field. However, his volume is noticeably lower than everyone's else, as he's only attempted 25 of these shots during the regular season.
So it can be deceiving.
11 of them. However, if you're looking for the right mixture of volume and accuracy, then you have to go with both James Harden and Kyrie Irving, who both are the only other two players who shoot above 36% from the field. With
my guess of Curry and LeBron.
James Harden shooting 25 for 65 from the field, and then you have Kyrie Irving shooting 21 for 55 from the field. And then when it comes to three-point percentage, both of them are second and third behind Klay Thompson as well. And then at the bottom, you have Paul George, who is shooting 11 for 63, 17.5% from the field on game-tying or go-ahead buckets in the last 35 seconds during regular season games. And then second to that, of course, as always, is Russell Westbrook.
Look at how many he's done.
35 for 125, which gives him a field goal percentage of 28%. Now moving on to the playoffs, and this is where it's going to get a bit controversial because the volume just isn't there, and that's the reason why I don't like using these arguments. So at the top of the list, we have Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, and Kyrie Irving, who are the only players who shoot above 50% on game time or go-ahead buckets in the last 35 seconds of a game. However, the volume, it's not even respectable. The only player who actually has a respectable field goal percentage on a respectable volume is LeBron James, who was 8 for 19, shooting 42% from the field. The rest of the players more or less follow that pattern when it comes to volume, except for Klay Thompson.
Like Kyrie Irving, like 3 altogether, compared to like LeBron with 27, like put together. So I can see why it's a hard sort of comparison.
Volume is relatively low. However, they've only made 1 for 3 or 1 for 4 respectively. However, the two players who have high volume and low efficiency is James Harden and Russell Westbrook. Westbrook at this point really shouldn't be that much of a surprise to you, but the amount of shots that they've missed is ridiculous. James Harden, 1 for 15. Russell Westbrook, 2 for 16. Then when it comes to shooting threes, Russell Westbrook, 0 for 10. James Harden, 0 for 7. Just ridiculous. However, when it comes to just taking the last shot during the playoffs, I'm going to lean more so towards LeBron because of the volume and a very respectable field goal percentage as well.
Has to be, man.
So, what did we learn today?
It's my guess. Come on, my guess was a lot.
Too much time on my hands. 2, perception is king, which is something that I was alluding to in the beginning of this video, where you have these narratives that are built around players. However, when you look at the actual facts, it tells a completely different story. For example, when you look at players such as Damian Lillard and Kevin Durant, where most people would make the argument that they are elite performers in the clutch. However, when you look at their numbers, they're average, and in some cases, they're actually mediocre. But on the flip side, you have players such as Jimmy Butler and LeBron James, who really don't come up that often in these conversations, especially Jimmy Butler, who I was pleasantly surprised at when I looked at his numbers. And then when it comes to LeBron, as we all know, many people over the past decade have tried relentlessly to try to push his narrative that he is not a clutch performer. Another thing that I learned is that Russell Westbrook is by far the worst performer out of all of these names. Now, let me be clear. When it comes to being clutch, I would make the argument that all of these players are clutch performers.
He's the worst of a good bunch, basically. Like, I see that. I do see that.
Because being clutch is an intangible, since you have to have the mental fortitude to attempt the shots while being under pressure, which is something that Westbrook clearly has no problem with doing at all. However, when you look at the efficiency from Westbrook under these circumstances, it just doesn't justify the volume. But what makes it even worse, damning, and even more frustrating is when you realize that Westbrook has actually played alongside other players on this list, such as Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Paul George, and yet for whatever reason has a higher volume than all three of those players, but the efficiency just isn't as good as any of those players, which means that there were better options in these late game situations.
That is interesting.
But finally, who has been the clutchest performer in the decade? And I would have to say it's Chris Paul. Not only does he have the volume and the consistency, but the efficiency is there as well. His accuracy is highly impressive.
I've really underrated him, man. I really have. I've really underrated him.
In the playoffs, and you got to take into consideration that for a majority of his career, he has been the only player on his teams who has the ability to attempt, create, and make these type of shots that are necessary in these clutch situations. So I feel very confident in saying that Chris Paul over the past decade has been the clutchest player in the NBA.
Chris Paul, man.
But with all that being said, people, please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button.
Shout out to this guy, and yeah, like you said, give him a subscription if you aren't already. I assume you will know who he is already, but banging video, man. And that was interesting, man. Chris Paul. I mean, that was a surprise to me. But I mean, that's maybe just because I've underrated certain players. I mean, yeah, I've definitely got to look into more of that, just so I can boost my own knowledge on certain things. But I just love these statistical videos, man. They're so unique and just, mate. More of these, man. I really enjoy them. I'm a stats guy, and I just love seeing random stats prove certain things, man. I love it. I absolutely love it. This video should be titled Bullying Exposing Russell Westbrook. He got done, to be fair. He did get... But maybe it's just in terms of clutch players, like, etc. This just feels like a Westbrook roasting video. People just getting at Westbrook. Russell Westbrook being the last in the least shocking thing all day. Being last is the least shocking thing all day. Is it possible for NBA legends like MJ, Kobe, Iverson? That would be interesting, man. I don't know if like the stats could go back that far. Like if they'd attract them back then in certain aspects. PG ain't clutch, believe me, I'm a Pacers fan. CP3 was the most clutch player in the league this year, and that's facts. CP3, man. Chris Paul. Need to put some more respect to my name personally. I really do. But I love this video, man. And again, like I said, if you want more of these statistical sort of videos that prove certain things, link in the comments what you would like to see, because god damn, I love this stuff so much. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Until next time, like, subscribe, peace.